Welcome to the Deep Dive on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com. I'm your host, Justin Wells, but more importantly, with me as always, Ian Boyd, Paul Wadlington, the X's and O's, and all the good background of InsideTexas.com is here. Please like our video and subscribe to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel. We're climbing to that 8,000 mark. Help us get to that. Also, please come see us at InsideTexas.com. We're having a special today this month. IT1 gets you 2 months of InsideTexas.com. That'll get you in May. That'll get you in June for all the official visits and recruiting and all the team guys coming back for summer workouts. A lot of stuff going on, a really good time. Come see us at InsideTexas.com. Today, we're going to be talking about the new SEC arms race, and we're not talking about facilities. This isn't about indoor stadiums. This isn't about weight rooms. This isn't about new electronic locker rooms. This is about quarterback play. These are the arms, and it's deep in the SEC. We've talked about it a little bit before on this show. We're going to go a little bit deeper. My man Ian Boyd has these rules for quarterback play that we're going to go through because it really, I think, it really talks about what you need to succeed. And the SEC has a lot of good depth here. And so, Ian Boyd, arms race, SEC, the 4 rules of quarterback play. What are you thinking?
Well, if we can go and get that up, Mr. Producer. Yeah, these are the 4 laws of college quarterback play that I conceived over at America's War Game, my Substack. And I really wanted to write this out and present this after Stetson Bennett won back-to-back national championships. And then you look back and it's like, who's the last guy before that to win back-to-back national championships, Justin?
Matt Leinart? No. Well, Leinart, actually, if you count the one in half the one in 03 and 04, Matt Leinart went back-to-back.
In between A.J. McCarron.
Oh, McCarron and Bama. Gotcha.
Yeah. The list, if you look at the list of back-to-back championship quarterbacks, it is not a who's who of famous NFL gunslingers, to say the least. In fact, if you look at national championship quarterbacks in general, or title quarterbacks in general, like even at the league level, you will routinely see game manager type quarterbacks propped up, and to some extent, by NFL wide receivers. Matty Mock, you remember that guy at LSU?
Absolutely. 07 team, right?
07, 03, 07? They had 2 guys like that in 03 and 07 when they won.
Yeah, 03 was Matty Mock, I think. I think 07 was the quarterback from Tyler Lee, who wound up playing in the NFL for the Seahawks and the Packers. What was his name? Matt Flynn.
Matt Flynn. There you go. That's another good example. So I wanted to go over, what I think are the laws that dictate what makes a good college quarterback. And then we're going to get from there, we're going to go into the shape of the quarterbacks in the SEC next year. And it'll be very obvious that it is a imposing list, to say the least. So this first one, I think these are almost self-explanatory. But number 1, receivers make the passer. I think the most important thing for a college passing game is having 1, at least, and ideally 2 NFL or fringe NFL level wideouts. Part of that is because the nature of offense these days, college offensive coordinators are not drawing up a lot of plays where the quarterback is dropping back and going 1, 2, 3 and throwing to the open man, right? They're scheming the NFL guy to be open as the primary read. Even when they'll even run, coordinators will draw up traditional progression plays that are theoretically 1, 2, 3, but they formation it and line it up in such a way where they are pretty sure the primary read is going to be open and that it's going to be the NFL guy. And so when you have guys that can spring open, that's just the name of the game. That's how you play offense these days. It's like in the 80s and 90s when maybe the most important thing was having a really dominant I-back, right? A tailback that could run the ball 25, 30 times a game, and everything was oriented around setting him up to control the game. Nowadays, that guy doesn't matter so much, and it's the receiver.
You know what's funny too is with Stetson Bennett, those three receivers, I don't think necessarily were regarded as franchise or NFL level guys at the time. But now looking back, Adonai Mitchell, Lad McConkey, Jermaine Burton, all playing in the league now. So that's a good point.
And Brock Bowers, who was essentially a 240-pound slot receiver. I mean, that guy might have been the best player in college football. I mean, they barely even showed it off at Georgia, in my opinion.
So, Ian, a simplified version of this would be when the quarterback drops back to throw, the value of a good receiver is that if your first read is open, he can just throw the ball. Or if your second read, the second receiver you referenced is open, he can just throw the ball. It doesn't have to be this machine of reads and where you're attacking the coverage, right? When you have great receivers, you're attacking human mismatches on the field, and those are always there, almost irrespective of what the defense does.
Yeah, and I mean what you just said. I mean, so what do you avoid when that's the case most of the time? You don't have to protect that long.
Right.
Your quarterback doesn't have to have amazing pocket footwork. The quarterback doesn't have to know the protections as well. Your other receivers don't have to consistently get to the right spot. It's not as essential that they be as good, right?
Yep.
They could just be like burners or blockers or what have you. Everything, it becomes so much easier.
Are we heading to number 2?
Okay.
Game isn't an insult. Why isn't that an insult, Ian?
Under the style that I just outlined, what matters at quarterback is not necessarily having a guy that can throw the ball a mile, although that's helpful, that can process the field, although that is helpful, but a guy that is developed in a system that understands all the little shot plays that the coordinator can draw up to get the ball to his top receivers, and that can just memorize and understand a high volume of those, and then just execute the game plan and go distribute. So it's as long as he knows how to drop back, get the ball to the right spot, and understand what the read is supposed to be. He doesn't have to be an amazing processor. He doesn't have to be amazing in the pocket. He doesn't have to have an amazing arm. He needs to be reasonably accurate, right? It just becomes plain why a guy like Stetson Bennett could be so effective, or AJ McCarron. If you're AJ McCarron and your job is hand off to like Derrick Henry or whoever they had in 2012, or throw on your first read to Calvin Ridley or Amari Cooper, right? It's not that complicated. I'm probably shorting McCarron a little bit. He's maybe a little better than I'm giving him credit for, but
he's tearing it up in the UFL right now. So
the quarterback is increasingly just becoming like a joystick for the offensive coordinator. And so you want a machine. You want a reliable joystick that's going to make the right decisions, that isn't going to try to hero ball you out of a game or whatever else.
Is it essentially doesn't turn the ball over?
Yeah.
Type of guy. It's hey, I'm not going to try to do too much kind of guy. I've got the weapons around me. I'm just going to plug and play.
And gets the ball out on time. So like when it's open, he actually throws it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I'd say 2 things for an effective game manager. 1, you get the ball out on time within the offense. You're not always trying to hold it for the big play, right? Or you're going to bail from the pocket and try to hero ball it. Take the 9-yard gain and move the chains, right? Because if your number 1 is good enough, the receivers make the passer, that little 9-yard gain, it's amazing how often in the college game that turns into a 27-yard gain because your receiver does something awesome with the ball in his hands. And then the second part, I would say, is something we talked about earlier in a previous deep dives, duplicability and consistency.
Yeah.
Can you consistently make the accurate open throw over and over and over? Now, that is a skill. That actually is not easy. But if you can do those 2 things, you can be Mac Jones, and you can be the trigger puller on one of the most dominant, incredible passing games any of us have ever seen. Because number 1 and number 2, those check boxes are happening. And if you're good enough at number 1 and number 2, Ian, what might that say about number 3? And before we talk about adding value, I want to talk about a guy who adds value in every transaction he does. His name is Gabe Winslow. You can reach him at 832-557-1095. It's right there on your screen. If you're one of our beloved podcast listeners, just listen to the melodious sounds of the numbers as it rolls into your brain. 832-557-1095. If you're driving, pull over right now and write that down. Because if you're going to buy a house, this is a guy you want in your corner. He's not just a game manager. He's also a guy who can go out and win the game for you. He can do either one. The reason you want Gabe, over 20 years in the industry, he's also a mortgage broker. He doesn't work for a big bank. So his name is part of this, is what's at stake here. It's not Chase Bank. It's not Wells Fargo. And he has access to over 70 different lenders to shop and bid your structure competitively. When you go with Big Bank America, they have exactly one option for you. Let me suggest to you that 70 people bidding for your business is superior to one, unless you're a socialist, in which case Gabe doesn't want your business. Give him a call, 832-557-1095. And now, back to our game manager, Ian Boyd.
Yeah. All right. So 3, running is where value add happens. So there's 2 places where this is true in the college game. They're both really obvious. If your quarterback can be a part of the run game, it gets much easier, right? It's one less guy that you have to block. Either you're reading him with a quarterback option or you're blocking him with the running back. And then it just breaks down defensive structures. And then when they're overcompensating for your option run game, it's that much easier for your coordinator to dial up your receiver to be wide open. And then the second one is in improvisation. When you're running like the shot play style of offense, you don't always see this play out like this, but theoretically, if your quarterback can go drop back, get the ball out on time to the first read, oh, wait, he's not open. Well, I'm just going to make something happen. I'm going to run around and find somebody. I'm going to run around and call my own number, whatever. It makes the shot play offense even more deadly on both levels. So like Caleb Williams is a very good example of this, because Caleb Williams could hit the ball on time. He could run their counter option plays, and then he could just dance around for forever and hit something big. Kyler Murray, too, in the Lincoln Riley offense was also very effective at this. Vince Young, obviously, Colt McCoy.
So, Ian, you're saying running has 2 components. One is the ability to run to pass. In other words, to buy time. And then another is just purely, hey, this wasn't a great play call. They're kind of on this, or the receiver ran the wrong route, but they're in man. I'm going to tuck the ball down and I'm going to run for 14 yards and we get a new set of downs to figure this out again.
Yep. I will actually say this is a tangential. In the NFL, I think this is wildly overrated. The guys that want to do this in the NFL routinely fall apart in big moments unless they're good at real quarterbacking. But in college, it's very rare that you run into defenses that can really handle it. It's very hard to stop.
When I saw number 3, my first thought was Sam Ehlinger. But I also feel like a lot of his was almost hero ball on third downs a lot of times. But it really does correlate with that. Number 4, Go ahead.
Hero ball, and it was the design of the offense. Yeah.
In a way, I think, unfortunately, it was.
I think there's an alternate world that Longhorn fans would be very surprised if Steve Sarkisian had been able to coach Sam. They would have been very surprised to see a guy who would drop back and be number 1 and number 2 and just deliver the ball and just be a quarterback and not have to bail. What Ehlinger always bailed, left? Or he always bailed right. Even when he had protection, because usually the routes weren't timed up. So he was just hoping for someone to spring open when they're running the scramble drill. But I think there's an alternate world where Ehlinger got different coaching and he actually turns into a pretty competent drop back passer and game manager.
I'll never forget when Sark took the job, the first phone call he made was to Sam. And he said, "Hey, come back. Be my Jake Locker." And Sam's, appreciate it, Coach, but no, thank you. Sark got Jake Locker picked number 10 in the draft. There was some magic happening there.
Y'all made this a sad Sad episode.
Well,
let's try to get it revived, Ian. Bring us number 4.
Here, I'm bringing out here we go. Here we go. Dropback passing is an old man's game, and Dan Marino just clicked off. He is no longer viewing this episode as we read number 4. Dive into that one, Ian.
This one is the least intuitive, I think, of the 4. What I mean by this is that true progression passing, where you have a play where your quarterback is in charge of the protection, he's got to know who's hot, how to get the ball out, and he's dropping back and he's making a number of multiple reads and decisions on every play. That does not happen. That doesn't happen all that much in the NFL sometimes now.
Yeah.
It does not happen very often in college. The only time you see it is with like 4th or 5th year quarterbacks that have just been around long enough to get to that level of play, or from like very rare special guys like honestly Jameis Winston as a redshirt freshman and then as a redshirt sophomore was remarkably good at this under Jimbo Fisher, and then like nobody ever was again. Although he also had NFL receivers, to get back to number 1,
Kelvin
Arch Manning might have this as well, where he could do this at a young age. It kind of looks that way to me. We'll see for sure, maybe this year or next. But usually it's like Vince Young was a redshirt junior before he was really good at drop back passing. Like even the year that they went and played Michigan in the Rose Bowl, Vince Young was low key kind of terrible at progression passing. And Colt McCoy, if you watch Colt McCoy, he was unbelievably good at it in 2008 as a redshirt junior.
Yes.
And the year before, he threw 18 interceptions.
Yep.
Chris Sims was like this. Quinn Ewers, we may see in his 4th year, finally flip the switch and start to get really good at this. We've done episodes on that, and we'll see how that comes along. But there's so many skills that go into it that you usually don't see it until a guy has been honing his craft for years and years.
It almost feels like number 4 is as important as number 1 in a sense. I guess it goes back to the veterans. Like in the SEC this year, a lot of these guys have a lot of snaps, a lot of games started, a lot of experience. You know, I guess I'm asking, is the team, the quarterback, the most veteran-laden quarterback, the most, teams centered around that guy? Do you see that guy? Do you see that team being in the top half of the SEC? Do you see Texas kind of in that upper echelon, Ian?
We'll see. I mean, it's going to depend on some guys making a leap. Like Paul always likes to talk about, like Joe Burrow in his last year at LSU was one of the best, maybe the best progression passer I've ever seen at the college level. And that was like, I think his 5th year in the college game, right? And it took that long. He probably had a little more of that skill that was hidden previously that Brady was able to bring out, the new offensive guy that they brought in that season. Yeah. But it also just took, I think, that some of that time for Burrow to reach that level of understanding college defenses and understanding all the tricks of the trade. So go ahead and, Mr. Producer, pull up our list. You got a few different guys that could maybe be that this season. I think Carson Beck is going to be one that's going to stand out at Georgia. This is his 2nd year as a starter. He's with who's their offensive coordinator out there now?
Bobo?
Yeah.
He's a Bobo.
Mike Bobo is the guy that will teach that to him if he has enough time. And we'll see how that goes. Quinn Ewers, obviously, could start to reach that level this season. You kind of want to keep an eye out for a guy like Peyton Thorne, who's just been around for forever and might suddenly have that capacity unexpectedly if he has some guys that he can throw to. If we can scroll down, Connor, I'll tell you if I see any other guys that stand out as potential.
I see some wide receivers that need to be noted, but go ahead, Ian.
Maybe Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah, I was going to say he's a good example of a guy that you may think he doesn't fit the requirements that Ian's talking about because he hasn't been the starter, right? But he's actually pretty experienced in the system. And LSU has been keeping him around and paying him to stay around for a reason. He's a potentially very gifted guy, and he's been there since 2021. He was a 2021 recruit, and so he may not have all the game reps that these other guys have, but he does have time in the system and time just to mature in general. Helps that he has a cannon arm as well.
It also helps his dad, Doug Nussmeier, quarterback guy, and he's got a little brother, Colton, who's a 2026 quarterback prospect at Flower Mound.
Wow.
I believe Garrett also started for 3 years in high school too, which does make a difference. It's not the same, but it definitely helps.
So, Ian, to check your stipulations on your list, the laws, the iron laws of quarterback, it seems like your two best candidates in the SEC. There's a lot of experience here, but the two best candidates are Beck and Ewers. And then I might argue Jackson Dart and Brady Cook.
Brady Cook to Burton is huge.
Yeah.
That checks your, elite receiver at number one, because some of these guys, if you reference number one, the receivers make the passer. There's not a lot of guys with a lot of experience there. I mean, Andrew Armstrong at Arkansas, he came from Texas A&M at Commerce. He was playing D2 ball in East Texas. Kelly Akari was playing junior college ball at Tyler Junior College 2 years ago, now coming out of Mississippi State. So, but then you got that Luther Burden. That's a dude that's going to be in the NFL in a couple of years. And Brady Cook, I think, is fifth-year guy, third-year starting. That checks a lot of Ian's boxes, in my opinion.
He can run a little bit too.
Yep.
I'm actually starting to think that Jalen Milroe may check some boxes. So last year he was an anti-game manager because he would hold on to the ball forever and take sacks and occasionally turnovers. He did not get the ball out on time. He had receivers and he didn't use them very well, but it all kind of worked out because his running was so valuable, right? So much value add from that. I was shocked in the spring game by how much better he looks immediately at actually getting the ball out quickly to the shot that Kalen DeBoer had lined up for him. So if you add that, and then, Jeremy Bernard is going to be good. They still have other guys at Alabama. If he's actually like on time and game managing for Kalen DeBoer, but then still adding his amazing running ability, then Jalen Milroe will end up being outstanding this year.
A quick thing on DeBoer that I don't think most people know, because they just associate DeBoer with Michael Penix and his predilections and frankly the desire and the need to keep Penix upright and healthy. Kalen DeBoer has a long history of running the quarterback and quarterback designed run game at his prior stops to Washington. So people who are thinking that he needs strictly just a passing quarterback, that is actually not his history. His history is designing the quarterback run game and then marrying it to this amazing offensive system, which he is just fantastic at coaching. So Jalen Milroe could absolutely level up. And if he doesn't, you might see a guy who's a preseason Heisman contender actually get benched, believe it or not. So that is possible. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible.
And also, we'd be remiss if we didn't point out, if you can scroll down to the bottom of the list, Mr. Producer.
Oh, here it comes.
Nick Anderson's a very promising player. I'll say that. But
that is the kid from Katy.
Yeah. That's a tough scene there for Oklahoma. No good tackles. They got a guy that got benched at USC playing left tackle for them in the spring game. Second-year quarterback in his first year starting in a new league. Every time I read a preseason thing about Oklahoma that's like, hey, they have a chance and it's going to be because Jackson Arnold, I'm like, that is a tough. If you stack him up with the other quarterbacks in the SEC, it does not look like they're going to get a big advantage from having Jackson Arnold behind center. Maybe
what is interesting, Ian, is both Tennessee and OU are counting quite a bit on their 5-star young quarterback just being a stud from the get-go.
Yep.
And so I think there's some people who are knowledgeable about football who, and I know your answer for this, that's why I'm setting you up. There's people that are knowledgeable about football saying, hey, man, I've actually seen freshmen and sophomore phenoms at quarterback 5-10 years ago come out, Johnny Manziel. Whatever happened to him is not relevant. The guy was a revelation early in his career and was a one-man gang and not a system quarterback. And he did everything wrong, but he made it right on the field with the force of his ability. Why is that not a relevant comparison anymore, Ian Boyd?
Because defenses have caught up to the spread offense in a lot of ways, and they do not sit back and give you easy, clean looks for the quarterback to know exactly where to throw the ball. So like when you get into the game manager deal, the coordinator does everything he can to set up the quarterback for just a quick primary read. But boy, it gets so much easier when the quarterback drops back and the defense is in the same look every snap. And he knows before the ball snapped for sure where he's going to throw it. And it was like that in college football for a couple of years before defenses figured out, like, we got to change things up. We got to show different looks. We have to move after the snap. So when the quarterback drops back, he doesn't see what he thought he would see. Yep. And it's just a very different game. The guys that you see now that are really good in their first or second year are much more unique. And they're also usually almost always like terrific runners that can drop back, be like, oh, that's not what I expected, but then just make something happen anyway, like Caleb Williams.
Ian, let me offer, I always like to flip the battlefield because I think you've made a really good hypothesis and thesis here about experienced arms and married to wide receiver talent, and then the ability to game manage when necessary and the ability to create with your feet when necessary, if needed. The other side of that is, what SEC teams can stop this? Because we see this array of quarterback talent. The SEC, without a doubt, has the best quarterback talent of any conference in 2024.
Top to bottom.
We see this array. So who can stop these guys? That might be the teams I'm interested in looking at to potentially overperform or at least present a challenge. And what I've come up with, the best four positioned at least, are Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Texas. And then I think there's a chance for Alabama and maybe Kentucky. I think the last one would surprise people. But those seem like the best positioned defenses to provide at least a speed bump to these guys. And a lot of that's going to rest on pass defense. So is it just pure talent in your secondary, or is it also coordination, gentlemen?
Coordination and also experience. Like, I think, especially at safety, but probably at cornerback too, you really, really want in college football the third, fourth, fifth year guys back there that have seen a lot of football and can get to the right spots in coverage. Not get fooled by the quarterback trying to look one way when he's always going to throw the other way, you know? And the interesting thing here is that because of the transfer portal and because of the winnowing of college football conferences into the Big Two, as you like to call them, Paul, every SEC team from here on out might be able to check off a lot of boxes that they wouldn't check off before. Like, there's really no reason why you wouldn't have a veteran quarterback with really good proven receivers around him every single season. Because if your young guys aren't ready, you should just go to the portal and get them from a G5 or from a previous Power 5 type school, right? Like an ACC or Big 12 or something. The level of experience and talent we're seeing on that list might just be the new normal.
So, Ian, the one counterpoint to that might be, we've got resource issues. You've got a payroll now in college football. So what we saw with Oklahoma is they had a very experienced senior quarterback with some flaws, but an incredibly successful college career in Dylan Gabriel. And then they had the 5-star up-and-comer. And honestly, Ian, they couldn't afford both. And they weren't both going to stay. Jackson Arnold was not going to stay there if they gave Dylan Gabriel the job again. And if Dylan Gabriel was told, hey, Jackson Arnold's competing for the job with you this year, he would not have stayed. And they can't afford both of them. You know, they only have so much NIL to throw around.
Yeah.
Dominic Williams notwithstanding. But I think that's the only counterpoint is that you do have an element of resource management now in college football. And so it is very helpful and vital to have an Arch Manning who they're not his career ain't controlled by street agents. It's the Manning family. They understand the seasoning of a quarterback. They understand the way to ruin a promising young quarterback is to give him too much too early. And so they were happy to bide their time and let Quinn Ewers return. And Arch will still get his 2 years starting at Texas and make his name. But that's a rare situation. And Arch has his own alternate NIL, right? He has legitimate NIL. So I think that's an interesting counterpoint, but it's a pretty narrow one, Ian. So I think you're right, is that the worst situation you should be in, and I'm saying worse in quotes, is the Garrett Nussmeier situation at LSU, where the guy sticks around and then he's going to start this year, and Garrett Nussmeier is going to throw for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. Like, I can promise you that. So it's not like they're going to have this huge drop off at quarterback. And I'm talking about they had a Heisman winner. So that's kind of the goal that Ian is talking about. And that seems to be what Steve Sarkisian's setting up at Texas. Am I wrong?
Yeah. And Texas has NIL resources for days. Like another program that doesn't, like say Ole Miss, maybe 1 year you have veteran Jackson Dart at quarterback. And so you're like, we're going to push in all our money this year, right? And we're going to buy up every player that enters the portal. And then maybe the next year you don't have that veteran quarterback and you have a younger guy. Maybe you hold some of your cash in reserve for when he's older, or you dedicate it to high school or whatever. I think we're going to see more of that kind of management from teams that cannot actually afford to contend at like a playoff level every single year.
And that goes back to Ian talking about the new normal. I think that's part of the new normal, resource allocation in NIL status, going with an older quarterback rather than maybe the younger 5-star, or taking that risk. If you're a new coach, that first year, you might be able to get away with playing that 5-star freshman, sophomore. Rather, if you're a third or fourth year and you really need to win this year, you're probably going to go in the portal to get a guy that can at least get you 9-10 wins if possible. It's the new normal, and that's what makes it fascinating, and that's what I love about the SEC arms race. The quarterback play is just deep, gentlemen. This was introspective. This was awesome. Ian and Paul, thank you so much, guys. Like, I love coming in with this because you guys have always got interesting, data points on each one of these factors. Hey, come like our video and subscribe to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel. We really do appreciate making us a part of your day and hanging out with us at InsideTexas.com. If you want to, use the promo code IT1, and that will get you 2 months of Inside Texas for only $1. IT1 gets you 2 months for only $1. Come see us at InsideTexas.com. And thank you again, Ian Boyd and Paul Wadlington, for another deep dive, SEC Arms style. We sure do appreciate you. Please come see us at InsideTexas.com, and be sure and stay tuned to what we have coming on this Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, from live streams to some of our episodes. Please continue to make us a part of your day. And thank you for joining us on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel, powered by InsideTexas.com.